AITA for canceling our mortgage after my girlfriend added her brother to our house paperwork. I'm Austin, 38, and until that morning, I honestly thought Clara and I were on the same side. We had been together for almost 4 years. That was long enough for my spare key to hang from her key ring, long enough for her coffee order to be saved in my phone, and long enough for a stack of paint samples to be stashed behind the passenger seat of my truck because we were supposed to be buying a house together. We weren't formally engaged, but we had talked about marriage the way people do when they think the hard part is already settled. We had looked at rings. We had discussed whether we wanted a small ceremony or something large enough to prevent her mother from complaining. Clara had even started referring to the house as our first real step. I believed her. I also knew her family didn't respect me. They never said it out loud. People like Clara's family rarely do. They prefer polished little jabs that can be denied later. Her mother, Diane, once asked if I needed help understanding the insurance documents for a car I had bought with cash. Her brother, Blake, liked to joke that I learned finance from guys yelling into cameras online. Her uncle Richard corrected me constantly, even when I was repeating something he had just said using different words. If I asked a question at dinner, he answered slowly, like he was speaking to a child who had wandered away from the kids' table. Clara always defended them after the fact. They communicate differently, she would say. The last time she used that line, I told her, "No, Clara. They insult differently." She had stared at me for a second and then sighed. You take everything as a test of respect. When someone keeps testing it, I notice. That conversation ended the way most of our conversations about her family ended. She hugged me, told me she loved how steady I was, and promised she would speak up next time. Then the next time came, and she laughed nervously while someone made another comment. I tolerated more than I should have because Clara was different when we were alone. In private, she admired the exact qualities her family mocked. She liked that I read every contract. She liked that I never missed a payment. She liked that I planned ahead and didn't spend money just to impress people. Whenever something went wrong in her life, I was the person she called because, as she put it, you don't panic. You fix things. Around her family, though, she became someone else. Smaller in some ways, more status conscious in others. She wanted their approval so badly that she treated my dignity like the easiest thing in the room to sacrifice. I kept believing she would outgrow it. The house made me think she finally had. We had spent 5 months looking. We disagreed about kitchens, yard size, and whether a finished basement was useful or just another place to store things we didn't need. We finally found a place that felt right. Nothing extravagant. Just solid, well-maintained, and big enough for the life we had been discussing. Our offer was accepted. The down payment was going to come mostly from me. That wasn't a secret or a source of resentment. Clara had savings, but I had more liquidity, and we agreed that ownership would reflect our individual contributions until we were married. We had that agreement in writing because I insisted on it. Clara had rolled her eyes when I first brought it up. You really think I'm going to steal your house? I think clear agreements protect good relationships. She eventually agreed, and for a while, I considered that progress. A week before the bank meeting, Clara told me her uncle wanted to help with the final financial arrangements. We were eating takeout at my kitchen counter. She had a mortgage checklist open beside her food and kept tapping the paper with the end of a pen. Richard knows people at the bank, she said. He can make sure everything is structured correctly. We already have a loan officer. This is more about the bigger picture. The escrow, shared accounts, how we hold the funds. He said there are a few things that could protect both of us. What things? I don't know. That's why we're meeting with him. I watched her for a moment. Is this a meeting with the bank or a meeting with your family? The bank. Richard will just be there to help. Who else? She looked down at the checklist. My mom might come. Why? She worries. About a house she isn't buying? Clara pushed her food around the container. Can you please not start this before we even get there? I'm asking who will be in a meeting about my money. Our money. The escrow deposit is coming from my personal account. Her expression tightened. That should have told me more than it did. The next day, I mentioned the meeting to my friend Grant. Grant had known me long enough to hear the part one wasn't saying. We were standing in my driveway while he helped me move a tool chest into my truck. When I explained that Richard had arranged a private appointment and Clara couldn't clearly tell me what we would be signing, Grant stopped with both hands on the metal handle. Have you seen the documents? Not yet. Ask for them. I did. Clara says Richard is bringing them. Grant gave me a flat look. What? If it's harmless, they won't mind you reading it. I plan to. Before you sign, not while 3 people are talking over you. I know how to read a contract. I know you do. They're counting on making you feel rude for proving it. That landed harder than I expected. Grant told me to request copies in advance, save every email, and keep a written record of anything involving transfers or account access. Don't go in angry, he said. Go in boring. Boring. Read it twice. Ask plain questions. Do not let them rush you. Keep the proof boring. Boring proof wins. That night, I emailed the loan officer and copied Clara. I asked for a complete set of the documents we would be expected to sign at the private appointment. The loan officer replied that the standard mortgage materials would be available through the secure portal. She also wrote that any supplemental planning documents had been prepared outside the mortgage team and would be provided by Richard. I forwarded that sentence to Clara. What supplemental documents? She answered 10 minutes later. Probably account authorizations and estate stuff. Please don't make this a whole thing. My uncle is helping us. I typed 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Finally, I sent. I'll read anything before I sign it. She replied with a thumbs up. The appointment was on a Thursday morning. I arrived early because I always arrive early when money is involved. The bank had reserved a conference room off the main lobby. Frosted glass covered the lower half of the walls, and there was a tray of bottled water on the table. A printed card near the door had Clara's name and mine on it. Richard was already seated inside. So were Diane and Blake. Blake had no reason to be there. He wasn't contributing to the house, wasn't part of the loan, and had never once offered an opinion about the property that wasn't a joke about what my money could buy. He wore a dark jacket and had a leather portfolio in front of him. When he saw me, he smiled as if we were meeting for a business lunch. There he is, he said. Big day. Diane stood and touched my arm with fake warmth. We're so excited for Clara, she said. Not for us. For Clara. I looked at Clara. She was sitting beside Richard and avoiding my eyes. Why is Blake here? I asked. She answered too quickly. He's here for support. Whose? Richard chuckled. Let's not create tension before Lauren joins us. Lauren was the bank manager overseeing the appointment. I had spoken to her briefly by phone the week prior. She seemed careful and direct, the kind of person who repeated numbers to make sure everyone heard the same thing. When she entered, she carried the standard mortgage package and introduced herself to the room. Her eyes paused on Blake. I wasn't aware we had additional participants, she said. Family advisors, Richard replied. Lauren looked at me and Clara. Are you both comfortable discussing your financial information with everyone present? Before I could answer, Clara said, yes. Lauren kept looking at me. I'd like to understand why they're here, I said. Richard leaned back. Austin, this is exactly why we're here. There are structural issues you may not be familiar with. We can spend all morning debating who sits in which chair, or we can let the people with experience handle the process. Lauren's expression didn't change, but she glanced at me again. I'm comfortable proceeding for now, I said, as long as I can ask questions and receive my own copies of everything. Of course, she said. Richard slid a second stack of papers toward me before Lauren had finished explaining the agenda. These are the related authorizations, he said. Standard practice for this type of account structure. I didn't touch the pen beside them. Lauren began with the mortgage application, pre-approval terms, and the escrow deposit. Those documents match what I had already reviewed in the portal. Then Richard interrupted. We can streamline the rest, he said. Austin is funding the initial deposit, and once the funds are consolidated, the family structure will provide additional flexibility. I looked up. What family structure? Richard gave me a patient smile. The framework described in the supplemental agreement. There is no family structure. Clara and I are buying a house. Diane folded her hands on the table. We just want Clara to be protected, she said. Not everyone is raised around these conversations. There it was. Soft voice, clean knife. I turned to the first page of Richard's packet. The title was broad enough to sound harmless. Asset coordination and contingent support authorization. The first section discussed accounts connected to the home purchase. The second allowed information sharing among the bank, an outside advisor, and certain named parties. The third referred to pledged assets, guarantor obligations, and cross-default events. I read it again. Then I went back to the definition page. An entity was listed by initials. I recognized it from an email Clara had once shown me when Blake was complaining about a business loan. I turned another page. Blake's full name appeared in an attachment titled Related Party Acknowledgement. I tapped the line with my finger. Why is Blake named in paperwork for a house Clara and I are buying? Blake's smile disappeared for half a second. Richard reached for the packet as if he planned to turn the page for me. It's a disclosure issue, he said. You may not be familiar with how related obligations are handled. I kept my hand on the paper. What obligation? Potential obligations. It's protective language. For whom? Richard sighed and looked at Clara like I had become exhausting on schedule. Austin, these are routine safeguards. No, they're not. The mortgage documents don't mention Blake. Your packet does. Blake leaned back in his chair. You really think everyone is trying to steal from you? I think your name is on a document tied to my assets, and no one told me why. He gave a short laugh. This is what happens when someone learns finance from videos and thinks every clause is a conspiracy. Diane looked at Lauren with an embarrassed smile, as though apologizing for my behavior. Clara leaned close enough that only I was supposed to hear her. Please don't embarrass me, she whispered. Just stay quiet and let the educated people talk. For a moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt something colder. For years of excuses rearranged themselves in my head. Every time Clara had told me not to take it personally. Every time she had said her family meant well. Every time she had praised my caution in private and mocked it in public. I looked at her. Did you read this? Richard explained it. That isn't what I asked. Her eyes moved toward her uncle. Can you not do this right now? Richard pushed the pen closer to me. We're losing perspective. The relevant language creates flexibility if there is a temporary liquidity issue. It does not change the home purchase. Whose liquidity issue? No one answered. I looked at Lauren. Is this packet required for the mortgage approval? She took a breath before answering. Not for the standard mortgage approval, no. Would signing it potentially expose assets outside the home purchase? Richard spoke over her. That is an oversimplification. Lauren turned toward him. I need to answer Austin's question. The room went quiet. She looked back at me. Based on my initial review, parts of this packet appear to contemplate collateral support or a contingent guarantee beyond the property being purchased. I would need our legal and compliance teams to review the exact scope. Clara's face went pale. Richard's did not. He looked annoyed. This is above his comfort level, he said. That does not make it improper. I closed the packet. You mock me for not understanding the paperwork, I said. The problem is, I understood it better than you wanted me to. Blake muttered something under his breath. I slid the pen back across the table. I'm not signing this. Clara put a hand on my arm. Austin, don't make a permanent decision because you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm reading. Richard's voice sharpened. The escrow deadline is today. Refusing to complete the coordinated transfer could jeopardize the purchase. Then the purchase is jeopardized. Clara stared at me. You can't be serious. I took out my phone and opened the banking app connected to the personal account funding the escrow deposit. The wire had been scheduled but had not yet been released. I canceled it. A confirmation screen appeared. Richard leaned forward. What are you doing? Nothing moves from my account until I understand what I'm being asked to risk. Clara lowered her voice. Austin, stop. I saved the cancellation confirmation, then emailed the mortgage officer from the table. Please consider this written notice that I am withdrawing authorization for the pending escrow transfer and pausing my participation in the joint mortgage file. No funds are to be moved from my personal account. I do not consent to any guarantor, collateral, information sharing, or related party obligation outside the mortgage documents I previously reviewed. I copied Lauren and Clara. When I finished, I placed my phone face down. Richard looked at me with open contempt now. You're blowing up a legitimate transaction because you don't understand sophisticated planning. No, I'm refusing a transaction because no one will answer a simple question. You've been given answers. Then say it plainly. What problem does Blake have that requires my signature? Blake stood so fast his chair rolled backward. This is ridiculous. Lauren raised one hand. Sir, please sit down or step outside. He stared at her, then at Richard. Richard gave him a small nod, and Blake sat. That tiny exchange told me more than another 10 pages would have. Lauren gathered the supplemental packet. I need to pause this meeting, she said. Austin, I'd like to speak with you privately. Clara, I will also need a separate confirmation from you regarding what you understood these documents to be. Richard objected immediately. There is no reason to isolate anyone. I'm the advisor who structured. Lauren cut him off. No one else can consent on Austin's behalf. The sentence hung in the room. I stood. Diane's polished expression finally cracked. You are humiliating Clara over paperwork you barely understand. I looked at her. Then it should have been easy to explain before asking for my money. I followed Lauren into a smaller office across the hall. She closed the door, but left the glass panel uncovered. I want to be careful with my wording, she said. The bank did not prepare the supplemental packet you were handed. I had not reviewed the complete version before today. Did you know Blake was involved? I knew Richard had requested a coordinated review involving another credit relationship. I did not understand that it would be presented to you as part of a routine home closing. What credit relationship? I can't discuss another customer's confidential information. What I can tell you is that your signature should not be obtained through pressure or confusion, and unrelated exposure needs to be separated from your home purchase. Could those documents have made me responsible for Blake's debt? Potentially, depending on how the final agreements were completed and which assets were transferred. The language is broad enough that I am escalating it. I sat back. Even though I had suspected it, hearing a bank manager say it made my stomach turn. Lauren continued. I need direct confirmation from you. Did you agree before today to guarantee any obligation associated with Blake or any family entity? No. Did you agree to pledge your personal funds or investment assets as support for anyone other than yourself and Clara in connection with the home purchase? No. Did you authorize Richard to act as your financial advisor or representative? No. She made notes. I will send written confirmation that the bank has paused the mortgage process at your request and that you did not consent to any additional guarantor or collateral obligation. I also recommend reviewing your accounts for any standing permissions. I already plan to. There may also be a credit inquiry associated with the broader review. I'm checking that now. My phone buzzed while she was speaking. It was an alert from the credit monitoring service I used. A new inquiry had appeared from a financing division associated with the bank. I turned the screen toward her. Like that. Lauren's face tightened. Do not dispute it yet. Let me identify how it was initiated. I will give you a reference number before you leave. She was professional, but the entire tone of the morning had changed. I was no longer the difficult boyfriend holding up a house deal. I was a person whose consent had become a compliance problem. When I walked back into the conference room to collect my keys and jacket, Clara stood. We need to talk. Not in here. Richard remained seated. Austin, he said, you are making decisions with consequences you have not considered. I'm considering them now. The sellers can terminate. You could lose the house. Yes. Clara could lose the house. Yes. He looked surprised that I didn't argue. I picked up my copy of the mortgage paperwork, but left his supplemental packet with Lauren. Then I walked out. Clara followed me through the lobby and into the parking lot. The morning was bright and cold. My truck was parked near the edge of the lot. I unlocked it, but didn't get in. Clara caught up to me, heels striking the pavement harder than usual. What was that? She demanded. A banking appointment. You made me look stupid in front of everyone. I turned around. That's what you're worried about. You canceled our house. I stopped my money from being tied to something no one would explain. It wasn't like that. What was it like? She crossed her arms. Richard said it was temporary support language. Blake is having a rough period. The family was trying to keep everything stable. With my assets. No one was taking your money. Then why did I need to sign? He just needed additional strength on paper. That's all. I stared at her. She had just admitted enough to destroy the last excuse available to her, and she didn't seem to realize it. You knew this had something to do with Blake. I knew there was overlap. You told me the meeting was routine. It was supposed to be. You told me Blake was there for support. He is my brother. What was I supposed to say? The truth. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed defensive. I didn't understand every clause. You understood enough to know I wouldn't like it. That's not fair. Did you know they needed me to sign quickly? She looked away. Clara. The timing mattered. Did you know? Yes, but I didn't think it would hurt you. I opened the driver's door. She grabbed the edge before I could close it. You're making this about pride again. No, you made it about access. What does that even mean? It means you were willing to let them insult me as long as I stayed useful. That is not what happened. You told me to stay quiet and let the educated people talk while they tried to tie my assets to your brother's problem. I was trying to keep the meeting calm by keeping me uninformed. You were escalating everything. I asked why Blake's name was in my paperwork. She wiped at her face. Do you know what this will do to my family? I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. Do you know what signing could have done to me? She didn't answer. Richard came through the bank doors and stopped several yards away. He did not approach, but his presence changed Clara's posture immediately. Her shoulders straightened. Her face hardened. You need to go back inside and fix this, she said. No. Austin, please. No. You made me look stupid. I looked at her hand still gripping my door. No, Clara. I made it harder for you to use me quietly. She let go. I got into the truck and left. By the time I reached the next intersection, my phone was ringing. Clara called 3 times. Then Diane called. Then Richard. I answered none of them. I drove to a coffee shop, parked where I could see the entrance, and called Grant. He picked up on the second ring. You signed nothing, right? Nothing. Money moved. I canceled the wire. Good. Tell me what happened. I gave him the facts, in order. No embellishments, no guesses. Blake was in the room. His name was in the attachment. The packet included guarantor and collateral language. Lauren paused the meeting and confirmed potential exposure. Clara admitted she knew there was overlap. Grant was quiet for a few seconds. Photograph everything you have, he said. Save the cancellation. Save the credit alert. Screenshot the messages before anyone starts deleting or editing. I don't have the supplemental packet. Lauren kept it. Email her and request a copy or written description of what you were shown. I will. Then make a timeline. Keep it short. Clara is calling. Don't answer while you're angry. I'm not angry. That's worse. You're hurt and organized. I looked through the windshield at people walking in and out with paper cups. She knew. I know. I kept thinking she was weak around them. I didn't think she was helping them. Don't argue with their feelings, Grant said. Let the paperwork do the talking. I spent the next hour doing exactly that. I saved the email requesting documents from the week before. I saved Clara's reply telling me not to make it a whole thing. I saved the escrow cancellation confirmation, the credit alert, and my withdrawal notice from the mortgage application. Then I logged into the shared household account Clara and I had opened for future expenses. The account held only money for inspections, appraisal fees, and moving costs. Most of it was mine. Clara had viewing access and her own debit card, but neither of us had used it for anything personal. I transferred my documented contribution back to my personal account and left Clara's contribution untouched. Then I disabled my card and requested that my name be removed once the remaining pending charges cleared. I also changed the passwords on my personal financial accounts, revoked an information sharing authorization Clara had for emergency purposes, and froze new credit activity until the inquiry could be explained. I did not empty anything that belonged to her. I did not cancel her phone, touch her money, or send angry messages to her relatives. I simply closed every door that should never have been opened without trust. Lauren emailed me before noon. The bank had paused the mortgage file. The escrow transfer had been canceled before release. I had not consented to any guarantee, collateral pledge, deposit control arrangement, or obligation related to a third party. The inquiry would be investigated, and no new credit facility would be opened in my name. She also wrote that the supplemental packet was being reviewed because it had been presented in a way that could mislead a customer into thinking it was required for the home loan. I read that paragraph 3 times. Then another message appeared on my phone. It was from Clara. I know you're angry, but please don't destroy everything before we talk. Richard says the bank is overreacting because you used words like fraud. I never said you were guaranteeing Blake's full debt. Please answer me. I had never used the word fraud. That was Richard preparing a defense against an accusation I had not made. I replied with one sentence. Do not communicate with the bank or anyone else as though you speak for me. She called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Her first voicemail was angry. You can't just pull everything because you had a bad morning. We made commitments. The sellers are waiting, and my mother is beside herself. Call me. The second came 20 minutes later. Her voice had changed. Austin, please. Richard says there could be consequences for Blake if the bank separates the accounts. I didn't know it was that serious. I need you to call me before they do anything permanent. That message answered another question. Blake's problem was not small. Around 1 that afternoon, Clara sent a text that made the whole situation worse. If he asks too many questions, just explain it later. A second message arrived immediately after. Sorry, wrong person. I stared at the screen. Before she could delete or reframe it, I took screenshots showing the timestamp and the surrounding conversation. Then I replied, "Who was that for?" No answer. 10 minutes later, another message came through. "Please don't twist that. I was talking about the seller's agent." It made no sense. The seller's agent had no reason to explain anything to me later, and Clara had never referred to the agent as he. I did not respond. That evening, I received an email from Lauren scheduling a formal follow-up call for the next morning. She said it would include the mortgage officer, a compliance representative, Clara, and Richard if he wished to attend as the person who presented the supplemental materials. Blake was not invited. At 7, someone knocked on my door. It was Clara. I watched her through the window for a moment before opening it. She had been crying. She held a grocery bag containing the takeout containers I had left at her place 2 nights earlier, which was such an ordinary thing that it almost broke me. "I need 5 minutes," she said. "You can have 5. She stepped inside but remained near the door. The paint samples were still on the counter because I had brought them in from the truck that morning. Clara looked at them and her tears welled up again. "We were supposed to choose this weekend." "I know. You canceled the house without even talking to me. I talked to you at the bank. You told me to stop talking." That was one sentence. It was a decision. She shook her head. "I was under pressure." "So was I? I still didn't offer your money to my family." "No one offered your money." "Then tell me exactly what Richard wanted." "He said Blake's company had violated some loan conditions after a bad quarter. The bank wanted more support or they could restrict the line. And the support was me. Not you. Our combined profile. My cash. My investment account. My credit." She looked down. "It was supposed to be temporary. Why didn't you ask me?" "Because you would have said no." There it was. Not confusion. Not a misunderstanding. A calculated decision to avoid my consent because she already knew the answer. I leaned against the wall. "You knew I would say no, so you brought me into a room with your family and hoped I would be too embarrassed to actually read it. That isn't fair. It's exact. I thought if Richard explained it, you would understand it was safe. You told Blake I would sign if Richard sounded confident enough, didn't you?" Her head snapped up. I had guessed, but her face confirmed it. "How do you know about that?" "I didn't. Not until now." She covered her mouth. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she sat on the edge of the chair near the door, as if her legs had given out. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "Show me." "What?" "Show me the messages." She pulled out her phone, but did not unlock it. "Austin, show me the conversation where you discussed whether I would sign." She stared at the screen. "No." "Then leave. You're ending 4 years over a text message." "I'm ending 4 years over what that text message proves." She stood again. "I love you. I believe you think you do. That's cruel. What's cruel is deciding I'm safe to risk because I'm stable enough to survive it. I didn't think it would hurt you. You keep saying that like it helps. It does matter. No. It means you didn't bother to understand the harm before volunteering me." She stepped closer. "We can still fix the house." "I don't care about the house." Her face crumpled. "I care. I know. I already told people." That sentence explained more than she intended. She had told relatives, friends, and coworkers that the purchase was essentially done. She had shown pictures. She had talked about renovations. The house was not just a home to her anymore. It was proof that her life was moving in the direction her family approved of. Canceling it embarrassed her. Risking me had not. I opened the door. "The call is tomorrow. Do not ask Richard to speak for you. What are you going to do? Listen, and then decide what remains." She stood on the threshold. "I need you to know I never wanted Blake to take your money. He didn't need to take it. He just needed it standing behind his debt." She flinched. I closed the door after she left. The next morning, I joined the bank call from my kitchen table. Grant was not on the call, but he had helped me organize a 1-page timeline. Dates, emails, transfers, exact statements. Nothing emotional. Lauren appeared first. The mortgage officer joined, followed by a compliance officer named Marcus. Clara connected from somewhere quiet. Richard joined last. He opened with a statement. I want to clarify that no one attempted to conceal any obligation. Austin became agitated during a sophisticated planning discussion and withdrew before the documents could be properly explained. Marcus said, "We'll ask questions in order." Richard continued anyway. The support arrangement was contingent, limited, and beneficial to the broader family financial position, including the house purchase. Lauren interrupted. "Richard, please stop characterizing the arrangement until we establish who authorized you to present it." He frowned. "I was invited by Clara." Marcus looked at Clara. "Did Austin authorize Richard to act as his advisor?" "No," she said quietly. "Did Austin receive the supplemental materials before the appointment?" "No." "Did you?" "Some of them." I looked at the screen. Richard shifted in his chair. Marcus asked, "Did you understand that the packet referred to a credit relationship involving Blake?" Clara hesitated. "I knew there was a family connection." "That is not the question," Marcus said. "Yes." "Did Austin know?" "I thought Richard would explain it." I spoke for the first time. "You told me the appointment was routine." Clara closed her eyes. "I didn't know all the details." "You knew enough to hide the purpose." Richard leaned toward his camera. "This is turning into a relationship dispute. The relevant issue is whether the documents themselves were valid." Lauren's voice stayed calm. "The relevant issue is also informed consent." Richard gave a tight smile. "No signature was obtained. There was no harm." I held up the timeline. A credit inquiry was initiated. My escrow transfer was scheduled. I was told the documents were routine and necessary for the house. When I asked why Blake was named, I was mocked and told to sign. Richard shook his head. "That is a dramatic interpretation." "You all laugh when I ask questions," I said. "Now answer them." No one spoke. I continued. "Why was Blake copied on the appointment email chain?" Richard answered. "Because his facility was the related obligation." "Why was that not disclosed to me before I arrived?" "It would have been disclosed during the explanation. After I was in a room with 4 members of Clara's family and an escrow deadline. That timing was not designed by me." Lauren opened a document on her screen. The supplemental packet was sent to the bank at 8:12 the night before the meeting. The request stated that execution was expected at the appointment. Richard's jaw tightened. I asked, "Why did the packet allow my personal assets to support a default connected to an entity I don't own?" "It provided temporary liquidity assurance." "For Blake." "For a related family facility." "I am not related to Blake." "You intended to marry Clara." "I intended to marry a woman who told me the truth." Clara started crying silently. Richard looked irritated by that too. Marcus asked him to identify the document that limited my exposure to the home purchase. Richard referred to a paragraph on page 9. Lauren read it aloud. "That paragraph limits the bank's administrative authority," she said. "It does not clearly limit Austin's collateral exposure under the cross-default section." Richard argued that the agreements would have been revised before final execution. I said, "Then why was I being pressured to sign them?" He did not answer. Marcus turned to Clara. "Did you communicate with Blake about the likelihood that Austin would sign?" She wiped her face. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It is relevant to whether there was coordinated pressure." Clara looked at Richard. Lauren said, "Clara, please answer for yourself." The resemblance between that sentence and what she had failed to do for me was impossible to miss. Finally, Clara said, "Yes." I opened the screenshots on my computer. "Did you write, 'He'll sign if Uncle Richard explains it confidently'?" Clara's eyes widened. Richard said, "Private family messages are not evidence of misconduct." I shared my screen. The message was there. Clara had sent me the screenshot late the night before, after she left my house. I hadn't asked her again. She had apparently decided a partial confession was better than having Richard control the story. The conversation showed Blake asking whether I was going to get difficult. Clara replied, "He'll sign if Uncle Richard explains it confidently. Just don't make it sound like a bailout." A later message from Diane said, "Austin likes to feel careful. Let him ask 1 or 2 questions, then move things along." Richard had responded, "The deadline will help focus him." The call went dead silent. Even Richard had nothing to say. I removed the screen share. Clara looked directly at me for the first time. "I sent you that because I wanted to be honest. You sent it after the bank stopped the transaction." I was scared. So was I. I didn't think Richard would put anything in there that could really hurt you. That's the part you still don't get. You were willing to risk me as long as it helped them. She pressed both hands to her face. Richard tried one last time. Austin, whatever you think of the family conversation, walking away from the home purchase is financially irrational. You have inspection costs, appraisal costs, and potential contractual exposure. We can separate the supplemental arrangement and proceed with the mortgage. Lauren said, the bank can discuss a clean mortgage application with Austin and Clara only if both parties still wish to proceed. I already knew my answer. I do not. Clara lowered her hands. Austin, please don't decide this on the call. I decided when I learned you hid the purpose of the meeting. We can go to counseling. This is not a communication problem. It is. No. I communicated. I asked what I was signing. You tried to stop me. She started to speak, but I continued. I'm withdrawing permanently from the house purchase. I will not open a joint account with Clara. I will not guarantee any family debt. I will not pledge collateral. I will not authorize Richard or anyone connected to him to receive my financial information. Marcus asked whether I wanted those statements recorded as formal instructions. Yes. He confirmed each one. Then I added, and Clara, I'm ending the relationship. Her face went still. Richard leaned back, as though my personal decision had become beneath his attention. Clara whispered, You're doing this in front of strangers? No. I'm stating it in front of the people who need to know there will be no financial connection. You're humiliating me. You humiliated yourself when you treated my boundaries like a threat to manage. She began crying again. I did not enjoy it. I did not feel powerful. I felt tired. But I did not take it back. Lauren explained that the mortgage file would be closed, the seller's side would be notified through the proper channel, and any recoverable fees would be addressed according to the purchase agreement. Because the escrow transfer had never been released, the large deposit was safe. We lost the inspection and appraisal costs. I accepted that. Those costs were painful. They were also cheap compared to what signing could have cost. Before the call ended, Marcus said the bank would investigate the inquiry and the presentation of third-party documents. He also said Richard's conduct and referral relationship with the bank would be reviewed. Richard responded that he welcomed a review. His tone said the opposite. The sellers terminated the deal 2 days later. Clara left me 6 voicemails. The first blamed me for wasting months of work. The second said Diane was having chest pains from stress. The third said Blake's lender had frozen part of his credit line because the expected support had disappeared. The fourth said Richard had been asked to provide records to his firm. The fifth was an apology. The sixth asked whether we could start over with a different house and no family involvement. I answered none of them by phone. Instead, I sent Clara a written message. The house purchase is over. Our relationship is over. I will collect my belongings from your place Saturday at 10. I will bring your key and an accounting of the shared expenses. Please have another person present if that makes you comfortable. There will be no discussion of restarting the purchase, opening accounts, signing guarantees, or continuing the relationship. She replied, You sound like a lawyer. I wrote back, I sound like someone who needs a record. On Saturday, Grant came with me but waited outside in case he was needed. Clara had packed my things into 6 moving boxes and lined them along the wall near the front door. A jacket, books, a charger, some tools, and the coffee mug I always used at her place. For years reduced to objects that fit in the bed of my truck. Diane was there. She stood in the living room with her arms folded. This has gone far enough, she said. Families help each other. Then help Blake with your assets. Her mouth tightened. You were going to become family. I was going to become useful. That is a very ugly way to see people who welcomed you. I looked around the room. They had never welcomed me. They had evaluated me, tolerated me, and finally tried to leverage me. I'm not discussing this with you. Clara came down the hall carrying a small framed picture of us from a vacation. She held it against her chest. Can we have 1 minute alone? No. Diane scoffed. You're afraid to speak to her without a witness? I'm done having private conversations that become different stories later. Clara looked ashamed. Good. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because shame was an appropriate response to what she had done. I handed her a small envelope. Inside was her spare key and a printed summary of the shared account. It showed every contribution, every expense, and the exact amount remaining that belonged to her. I had also included confirmation that my access would be removed once the final inspection charge cleared. She opened the envelope and stared at the key. You really planned all of this. I documented it. Same thing. No. Planning would have been discussing it before trying to make you responsible for someone else's debt. Diane started to object, but Clara raised a hand. Mom, stop. It was the first time I had ever heard her say that firmly. Too late, but firmly. Clara looked at me. I told Richard not to contact you again. He already knows not to. I also told the bank everything. I know. I'm trying to fix what I can. That's good. Does it matter? It matters for you. It doesn't change my decision. She swallowed. I keep thinking about what I said in that room. So do I. I was trying to stop everyone from fighting. You were trying to stop me from resisting. I know that now. I picked up the last box. She held out the framed picture. Do you want this? No. Her hand dropped. I carried the box outside. Grant helped me load everything without asking questions. As we were closing the tailgate, Clara came to the doorway. Austin. I looked back. I did love you, she said. I believed her. That was one of the harder parts. People can love you and still decide their comfort matters more than your safety. Love does not automatically make someone honest, brave, or trustworthy. I know, I said. Then I left. The bank resolved the credit inquiry within a week. It had been triggered as part of a preliminary review connected to the proposed support structure. Because I had not authorized that purpose, the bank removed the inquiry and sent me written confirmation. Lauren also confirmed that no guarantee, collateral agreement, deposit control authorization, or related obligation had been opened in my name. I printed that letter and kept it with the rest of the records. The shared account was closed after the final charges cleared. Clara received every dollar that belonged to her. I absorbed most of the lost inspection and appraisal costs because I had agreed to fund them. It wasn't satisfying, but it was clean. Richard did not lose his career overnight. Real consequences are usually less dramatic than that. His firm contacted me for a factual statement. I provided the packet title, the timeline, the messages, and Lauren's written confirmation. I made no claims I couldn't prove. Later, I learned his referral privileges with that bank had been suspended during the review. He was also removed from any role involving Clara's future mortgage applications. Whether his firm disciplined him beyond that, I don't know. Blake's financial situation became harder to hide once my assets were no longer available as expected support. He had to sell an expensive vehicle, and a family-owned investment account was apparently liquidated to stabilize part of his credit line. No one threw him in jail. No one dragged him out of an office. He just had to face the problem his family had tried to place behind my name. Diane told relatives I had abandoned Clara days before closing because I was insecure about Richard's education. I didn't respond publicly. Then Audrey called me. Audrey was Clara's cousin and one of the few people in that family who had always been neutral toward me. She said she wasn't calling to argue, but she wanted to understand why I had destroyed the house deal over an insult. That isn't why, I said. That's what everyone is saying. Did they tell you Blake was named in the supplemental paperwork? There was a pause. What? I sent her the one-page timeline, the relevant screenshots, and the written confirmation that I had not consented to third-party exposure. Nothing else. She called back 20 minutes later. I thought you were being proud, she said. I didn't know Blake's name was part of it. They knew that version sounded worse. Clara knew. Yes. Audrey was quiet. Then she said, I'm sorry. I thanked her and asked her not to become a messenger between Clara and me. She respected that. A few days later, Diane stopped telling the story so freely. Not because she suddenly felt guilty, but because people had started asking specific questions. Why was Blake in the room? Why did Austin's paperwork mention collateral for a related obligation? Why did Clara tell Blake not to call it a bailout? Polished cruelty works best when no one asks for the documents. Clara sent one final letter about a month after the bank meeting. It was handwritten, which felt strange after weeks of screenshots and formal emails. She apologized without blaming Richard in every paragraph. She admitted she had wanted the house, the marriage, and her family's approval all at once. She said she convinced herself that because I was careful and financially stable, I could absorb a risk that would have destroyed Blake. That sentence was the most honest thing she had said. She also wrote that she understood why I could not trust her again. I did not respond. By then, the paint samples were gone. I threw them away one afternoon while cleaning out the truck. For a few seconds, I stood beside the trash bin holding the shade Clara had liked most, a soft gray she said would make the living room feel calm. Then I dropped it in. I'm not glad the relationship ended. For years don't become meaningless just because the ending exposed something ugly. There were good mornings, long drives, private jokes, and plans I had believed in. But I no longer confuse history with obligation. I also stopped trying to earn respect from people who had already decided what I was worth. Richard thought a degree would keep me quiet. Diane thought manners would disguise pressure. Blake thought I would be too insecure to challenge him. Clara thought love gave her permission to manage my consent. They were all wrong. I did understand the room. I understood the deadline was being used against me. I understood the extra people were there to create pressure. I understood the paperwork was broader than the house. And finally, I understood that Clara was not standing beside me. She was standing with them, hoping I would fund the future she wanted without asking what it could cost me. They laughed because they thought I didn't understand the room. They stopped laughing when I cut off the funding. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.